Coming up on Man Enough.
Do you think that we are becoming too sensitive as a culture?
No, we're becoming more mature as a culture. Our ability to see harm is evolving so that things that we would have given a pass to only a few years ago, we no longer have to give a pass to it. Calling people out is our tactic of last resort. It's not the first thing you do. You try to talk to people first. You ask them questions first. People either deny that they've done any harm and claim to be misunderstood and all of that, which is probably true in their eyes, or they fall on their swords like they can't do enough mea culpas. Either one of those doesn't work for me. I want real people around me. I don't need a martyr and I don't need an asshole. I need real people.
Being man enough, what does that mean?
It's really manly to mess up, admit you're wrong, and then grow.
I couldn't accept that I was evil, so maybe I'm broken, but those broken things could be corrected.
Intimacy between a father and a son is me just wanting to put my head in your lap.
I love you, son.
You haven't called me benevolent sexist, but my experience is women are better.
Even if it's a positive, it's still not equality.
I don't blame men for that. I just blame the system.
This
is
Man Enough.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Man Enough.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, okay.
Here we are.
I'm Justin Baldoni.
I'm Liz Plank.
I'm Jamey Heath.
All right, so look, I just want to jump into this one. So you both know I've been trying to get this particular person on our podcast for at least 2 years. Emily introduced me to her. I don't remember if she was listening to a podcast or what it was, but then I went in and did a deep dive and became such a fanboy of her work. And I'm just so thrilled to have Loretta J. Ross on the show with us today. All the way from Massachusetts. She's a professor at Smith University. Hi.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing great, fun old lady.
Oh, my God. I got to tell you, Loretta, your work has had a profound impact on me and my wife. We've had hour conversations after listening to you. Your TED Talk was just incredible. I've actually, at one point, I was going to sign up for your trainings that you do because I was just so drawn to this work. And I think you're so uniquely positioned to speak to this in a way that so many people can't. And I'm just so excited to talk about so many things with you today. Before we do that, I'm going to have Liz read a portion of your very long series of accomplishments that have done so much for the world.
Yeah, Loretta J. Ross is an activist, a public intellectual scholar, an associate professor at Smith College. She was the 2022 recipient of the MacArthur Foundation Genius Award, and she's really dedicated, the last 50 years of her life to ending sexual and reproductive violence against women. As a leader in the women's rights movement, Loretta really pioneered the theory of reproductive justice. The reason why
coined
we
the phrase,
have
I believe,
that
too.
word is yes, thanks to her. And she really helped launch what today is the Me Too movement. She was also inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. So I don't know. I feel like we have a total slacker on our hands here. She also, I think, is already my favorite person because when we start the podcast, usually Jamey will tell the guests, just so you know, we're going to talk amongst ourselves and pretend like you're not there, but don't take it personally. We're just, that's how we start the show. And everyone always goes, oh, okay. And Loretta went, of course, I'm not going to take it personally. You don't know me. And I that is the energy I am here for.
I love it. And I love that you're on someone who was raised, I have sisters who look like you. And in my family, we oftentimes didn't see someone who looked like my sisters that were powerful women. Mainly my mom is white, so my aunts are white, and they're wonderful and they're beautiful. So there was a select few that had an opportunity to demonstrate the power of women, but not only the power of women, but through brown skin as well. So the fact that you do the work that you do and have touched so many lives. So we love what you do. So I'm really thrilled that you're here for so many reasons. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful appreciation.
So Loretta, this is a two-part question. How would you define call in? How would you define what it means to call somebody in? And what do you say to those people who believe that cancel culture is not a real thing, that it's about accountability?
Well, the basic definition of calling somebody in is based on the definition of calling somebody out. When you call somebody out, you're publicly shaming somebody because you want to hold them accountable for the harm that they've done. And probably the most important word in that sentence is that you did it publicly, because you certainly could have pulled them to the side and said the same thing. So you staged it publicly, either online or in person. So a calling in is a call out done with love. You're still pursuing accountability. You're not giving people a pass on injustice. You're just choosing another strategy that's more likely to work, by the way, than putting somebody in front of a firing squad, because nobody runs to jump in front of a bullet. If they know you're coming at them, they're going to run, they're going to hide, they're going to deny, they're going to double down, they're going to do a whole lot of things other than saying, thank you for publicly shaming and embarrassing me. I needed that today. I mean, that is not how humanity works. I'm trying to get people to understand how ineffective call out culture is. And particularly since the election of Trump, we've got a whole culture of shamelessness going on where people are bragging about being racist, bragging about grabbing them by the pussy, bragging about corruption, normalizing corruption. I mean, that if you're not corrupt, you're not playing the game smart enough. And so we have to outsmart that. We have to think beyond that, as opposed to sinking down to that kind of base level. That requires accessing things people like that have no access to. They're in such war within their own souls that they're having trouble establishing authentic relationships with other human beings, including their own kids. I mean, I get a lot of calls from people who are, particularly white people who are used to, black people protesting, trans people protesting, blah, blah, blah. But the difference now that's driving my calls is that the revolution has come home to the Thanksgiving dinner table. You can't gate your own kids out who are on the internet, who are demanding that you use different gender pronouns. You can't, ignore.
And you're teaching this generation. You're a
Right,
professor
exactly.
to this generation. So what are you observing?
That young people are eager to learn, but society's not offering them enough moral compasses to know how to locate their own integrity. So
Oof.
they're self-censoring themselves for afraid of saying the wrong thing out their mouths because they don't want to paint a target on their foreheads for not knowing the right word, or what we call the unfolding thought. They don't want to put it out there. Yet they really want to do and be the right thing because they're much more intersectional than any previous generation. They pay attention no matter how conservative the parents are. They're sneaking onto the internet and finding out a whole lot more than what their parents even are aware of. They are eager for someone to show them how to do the right thing the right way. And when I tell them that you don't have to engage in a call out culture to do that, it's like they heave a sigh of relief because they didn't want to get into the scrum and then become permanently afraid that the target was going to be painted on their forehead next. And they didn't want to get into the preemptive meanness as a way of, acting like a bully as a way to keep from getting bullied. They really want a different strategy. And we've taught young people radical politics, but we haven't taught them the politics of radical love. And you got to handle that consciousness responsibly. And that's what's missing.
Yeah.
Wow. So, all right, we're going to ask you what we ask everybody. When is the last time that you yourself didn't feel enough?
Probably this morning, because that's an ongoing struggle with me. I always want to live up to my integrity. And there are so many times a day that I get challenged in that struggle. As a matter of fact, I was looking at a photograph of a famous man from a famous family who's a little cuckoo. And I said, he's not only the craziest member of his family, he's the ugliest. And I was like, oops, delete tweet. Fit the image I have of myself. And I'm ashamed that I thought that.
Mm.
So I have to call myself in a dozen times a day because I don't have a filter. And so I have to trap a lot of words behind my teeth so that they don't come out. I have an opinion on everything. I just
Then we
try
love your
not to.
opinions. I'm curious, how have you've been in this work for so long and you were such a pivotal part of the work that we get to do now today. How have you seen masculinity, feminism, these conversations sort of evolve in the last 50 years? Like, is it giving you hope?
When we started the first Rape Crisis Center in 1972, we weren't supposed to talk about those things, particularly if you came from the Black community, because it was seen as airing your dirty laundry, and you didn't do that in front of white folks, I was told. One of the more interesting things I did starting in 1979 was that I got this letter from a man in prison named William Fuller. And William wrote this letter and said, "Outside, I rape women, and inside, I'm raping men. And I'd like not to be a rapist anymore." And I swear I left that letter on my desk like it was radioactive because I was angry. I was like, we don't even have enough resources to help the victims. And here's a perpetrator writing for help. How dare you? But my curiosity got the better of me. I went down to Lorton, which was DC's jail at the time, and found out that William and another man named Larry Cannon had started Prisoners Against Rape, the first male led group to work to end violence against women while they were incarcerated. And so I spent 3 years teaching incarcerated Black men who had raped and murdered Black women Black feminist theory and Black history. So I've had some pretty interesting moments in doing this work, and I've seen a movement of men grow up to end violence against women. I've seen men, straight and gay and trans, come together to learn about women's human rights so that they could join that movement. So I've had some wonderfully interesting and scary moments because I was scared gritless going into that prison, I'm telling you.
Well, I think, and you left out something that you've spoken about publicly so much, which is, yes, you were going in there and teaching those men, but you were also going in as a survivor of rape and incest yourself, which just for me, my mind explodes trying to imagine. How did you do that?
I think I first went there to tell them off. I really never had a chance to hold the people who violated me accountable. I mean, the incest was from a cousin. I got pregnant, had the baby, kept the baby, so I ended up co-parenting with my rapist. So that was traumatic by itself. And since I was never able to hold my violators accountable, I think I actually went there to admonish them, to curse them out, to celebrate that they were behind bars. And it wasn't until they started telling their stories about what they'd been through that turned them into, the terrorists that they became. Then I found that I couldn't be angry at them anymore, even though they had done some horrible things. But I also discovered that society doesn't want to hear from people who are incarcerated. They only want to hear what they've done, because most of them went to prison as teenagers, and by the time I met them, they were in their 30s. So they had gotten their GEDs, they were self-taught, they were trying to reclaim their humanity beyond being a statistic in a jail.
So you grew compassion for the very people that were, as you say, were terrorizing. How then, what did you do with that now that you had no longer had vitriol or anger towards them and understood maybe that they had a story themselves in trying to reclaim their humanity? How did you feel then they could actually serve humanity ultimately in healing?
Well, part of my false bravado was that they were serving life sentences. So I didn't ever expect them to get out. I wasn't going to participate in writing any letters to the parole board or smuggling any tennis shoes or cigarettes in for them. I mean, I was not there to help them cope with being incarcerated. And I was very, very angry at men, even though I was dating one at the time. I was still very, very angry at men because of what had happened to me. And if I hadn't grown up with 5 brothers and a dad, I would have thought that all men were monsters based on what had happened to me. But I knew brothers and dad weren't like that. So that kind of helped me keep perspective. One of the things that shocked the hell out of me, I have to say this, is 10 years after I left the rape crisis center, I'm walking down the streets of DC and I hear this booming bass voice, Loretta, Loretta. And I turn around and William Fuller was out on the street. And I did not expect that. And he ran towards me like he wanted to hug me, but we'd had conversations about not touching women without permission, right? So he kind of drew back. And he was so proud to report that he had won his release. He was working as a construction worker. He held up his little lunchbox and showed me that he was a productive member of society again, and had gotten married and had a kid and turned his life around. And that was when I realized the significance of how he had changed me and how he had worked so hard to rehumanize himself. And I just, those kind of memories are precious. But I also learned that even though I was afraid, I did not have to let the fear stop me from doing what was right. And that lesson has also stuck with me all my life. I've never stopped being afraid, but I learned to not let the fear control me. The way I put it today is that I'd rather be trauma informed, but I don't have to be trauma controlled.
When I hear you talk, it feels like I'm listening to a sermon. Like it feels like God coming through and reminding us that we're all human. Like we're all going to make mistakes. Of course, some mistakes require very particular punishments. At the same time, we're human. And if God can eventually forgive us, why can't we forgive each other? And you've demonstrated that in such profound ways. And we're living in a time when, let's be frank, there's not a lot of space for us to be human. There's not a lot of space to make mistakes. And there's a lot of fear around what happens if you make a mistake. If you're a person who made a mistake and then you get canceled or called out. And you've had so many profound ideas around this that I'd love to draw that line from where you were then to where you are now.
Well, I'll try to draw the through line as quickly as I can. When I was 10 years old, I was with my family driving from Fort Belvoir, Virginia, because Dad had retired from the Army, to Texas. And we stopped at this gas station in Mississippi. And that was back when people came out and pumped your gas. Mm-hmm. And so while the guy was pumping the gas, and it was me and two of my 8 siblings and my mom and dad, while the guy was pumping the gas, Dad went to the bathroom. And when he was coming out the bathroom, the white man pointed at him and said, "You used the wrong bathroom. You used the wrong bathroom." And my dad looked up, he said, "I used the men's room," because it didn't occur to him that he was supposed to have gone around the back and used the colored bathroom. And so he and the guy got into an argument. Dad threw the money at the guy. We took off. And about 20 minutes later, this car full of white kids came up behind us, pulled parallel to us, and shot at our car. Now, what those kids did not know, that Dad had been in the Army for 26 years as a weapons specialist. We had a car full of guns. So he pulls off to the side of the road, goes in the back of his car, and when those kids U-turned and came back around, he fired at them. But he did so intentionally over their heads because he was a marksman. He could have wiped them out. And so I didn't go back to Mississippi for 40 years. But in 1990, I accepted a job at the National Anti-Klan Network, renamed the Center for Democratic Renewal. And our job was to monitor hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan and the neo-Nazi movement. And my particular responsibility became helping people who defected from these hate movements re-enter society, because we were kind of like an informal witness protection program, except that we weren't the FBI. We had a network of churches that would provide shelter, clothing, food for these people running from their lives from hate groups, because you don't put a hate group like you're leaving the Kiwanis Club.
Yeah.
You don't just send in your resignation and say, "See you, don't want to be you." You know, it's not like that. You're leaving knowing about a lot of criminal activities, and they generally want to kill you to keep you from spilling the beans.
Wow.
When I first heard that was my job, I was pissed off, because I said, if the Klan hates me, I'm all right hating them back. I mean, that's kind of like one group that society gives a Black woman permission to hate. Like, nobody criticizes you if you say you hate the Ku Klux Klan. Except my boss then was Reverend C.T. Vivian, and he'd been an aide to Dr. Martin Luther King. I said this in my TED talk. And Reverend Vivian, when I took my disquiet to him, he said, Loretta, when you ask people to give up hate, then you need to be there for them when they do. And I said, shh. I couldn't cuss at a preacher. I'm too much of a Texas Southern girl for that, right? But I didn't like his answer at all. But I had to talk to these people and find out what they needed, get them hooked up with help. And I found that once I got to know them, I couldn't hate them anymore. And that made me mad because hatred had been my fuel for my energy, my activism. I was doing the right thing for the world, fighting hate groups kind of thing. That was part of my identity. So I felt grief at the loss of hate. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Oof.
Wow.
And so I had one particular person I handled named Floyd Cochran. And Floyd had been the national spokesman for the Aryan Nation. And he had recruited into the Aryan Nations two teenagers, a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old from Allentown, Pennsylvania. He totally helped them become Nazis. And one night, these two kids came home and murdered their entire family, the father, the mother, and their 12-year-old brother. And I had talked to the mother 2 days before she got killed because she was afraid because the kids were threatening them on a daily basis, but she didn't want to lock them out of the house. She was worried about making her children homeless. When I'm telling you, you need to change those locks, honey. I mean, they're Nazis and they're threatening you. And she wouldn't do it. And 2 days later, they got massacred. And so, since I was handling Floyd a couple of years after this, and he wanted to do a tour of atonement because he was a lonely, bullied, skinny white kid from upstate New York who found that once he put on a swastika, instead of him being afraid, people were afraid of him. And so we still see that pattern taking place today. Alienated, lonely kids becoming incels, becoming, school shooters. All of these things are still going on in our society. So getting to know the Floyds of the world was also a through line for me. Learning to talk to ex-Klansmen and women was a through line for me. So that brings me up to the call out culture because I figured if I could learn to talk to rapists and I could talk to Klansmen, I mean, you can't talk to someone who forgets your gender pronoun. I mean, get over yourself.
I'm afraid to laugh at that. I feel like, keep going.
Wait,
Keep going.
why are you afraid to laugh at that?
I mean, you're having me reflect on so much. And I love the way that your strength and bravery in being able to approach all of these things in this way. There's a big history of sexual violence in my family. I know a lot of survivors and that I love and that are close to me. And having empathy for their rapist or having empathy for their abuser, I get the theoretical, I get it theoretically, right? That would set you free, but isn't part of it. Do you think, you said hatred fuels the activism and that's what the fuel is. Doesn't that also fuel not blaming yourself, right? Or sort of rebelling against, because I think that's the pain that so many survivors hold and are rebelling against. It's that they are told by society and do it to themselves that I am the reason that I was a victim. And being mad at the abuser is almost like a survival tactic in a way and allows them to survive. And even some of them can't even get there. Do you think that it's mandatory to have empathy for abusers?
Well, again, let me add a little bit more of that intellectual biography. Remember, I kept the child of my rapist.
Mm-hmm.
My son grew up looking like his daddy every day. So I had to love the child and hate the circumstances at 14. Okay. And so I had to learn to be very precise with my anger in order not to damage my own child. And I'm 70 years old now, so I'm reprocessing and reshuffling memories and didn't have the words back then that I can use now. But it's always a process of ensuring that I'm always going to work to become more than what happened to me. Because at 14, I wasn't going to let that rapist's dirty fingerprints determine who Loretta Ross was going to be. That would have been conceding defeat in my heart and in my head. I knew I was going to be more than a survivor and a victim. Now, that doesn't mean it was easy, because I got into drugs, got into sex work, got into suicide, and a whole lot of other things on the pathway towards getting some therapy and getting some help. And without that therapy, I would not still be here, to be honest. And so I'm constantly renegotiating with my pain. And I think because I worked at a rape crisis center, I had to bring forth what I went through every day as part of my work. I wasn't able to just package it away and forget about it and pretend that was another life or a bad nightmare from which I was going to wake up. I had to tell other people my story to encourage them to tell their stories. And so my trajectory is probably a little different, because I had to repurpose my trauma to use it in the service of building a movement to end violence against women. But one thing that I'm clear on with fighting the call out culture is that we've got to stop people making careers out of being offended. That's just not helping anybody. And when you wrap yourself so securely in that victim mantle, you've intentionally placed yourself in the least empowered position in the world.
Right.
Because you're always going to be somebody's victim. Somebody says something you a little off, you're victimized. If they raise their voice at you, you're victimized. If they don't get this right, you're victimized. If they don't hear you the right way, if they use a word you don't like, you're victimized. And then you're trying to make the world responsible for your failure to get some help. And that's not how the world actually operates. I say, kind of jokingly, but I'm serious as a heart attack. Some people need to get a therapist instead of a keyboard.
I want that T-shirt. I want a bumper sticker and a T-shirt.
Love that.
But is that new? Like, is this like a newer version of something that's already happened before and particularly I think in just progressive movements and groups, or is this like a new thing that you're noticing?
No, this is ancient.
Yeah.
I mean, human behavior has not changed much over the millennia. I mean, the original definition of a call out was Alexander Hamilton getting killed in a duel. It's just that we've got better toys now.
Yes.
And instead of getting one person to challenge you to a duel, that one person with the keyboard can get 10,000 people to say the same awful thing about you. So the virality and the scale has changed, but the human motivations for seeking punishment and revenge on people is very, and wanting to exile them. I mean, wasn't there such thing as a scarlet letter? I mean, we want to do these things to each other. We want to do the right thing, but we often do it the wrong way. And that's what I want to teach people about calling in technique. But back in the civil rights movement, they had a saying that we need to learn to turn to each other instead of on each other. Because they were all on the same side, bitterly fighting. Dr. King, Reverend Lowry, Andrew Young, they were fighting. But they knew how to strategically unite in the face of segregationists. And so my biggest fear is that we major in disunity instead of unity. A line I use in my book is that the left does a good game talking about intersectionality, but the right wing organizes intersectionally while we organize in silos. Then even within those silos, we call each other out for not being Black enough or feminist enough or trans enough or whatever, and not knowing the latest lingo off of TikTok and calling each other problematic and saviors and act like cynicism is something that only you have created or something. I mean, it's just the way I put it, because I'm a human rights activist and I unabashedly fight the right wing. I mean, I'm not ashamed of saying that I fight the neo-fascist movement. And it's not just conservatives. I don't have any real beef against conservatives, but I do have a problem with the fact that a political party has not divorced itself from the white supremacist movement and is becoming more white supremacist every day, because they're basically saying that if they can't monopolize the power in our democracy, they'd rather destroy it. So I'm clear about who my opponents are. They think they're fighting us, but I think they're wrong about that. What they're really up against is they're fighting truth, they're fighting evidence, they're fighting history, and most of all, they're fighting time. And I think truth, evidence, history, and time is going to kick their asses. Even if we do nothing right, we got all of that on our side. And my biggest fear right now is that we'll snatch defeat from the jaws of victory with our call out culture when we cannibalize each other.
Mm.
These people are just, as I often say, pimples on the ass of time. They do not have the power to push us back to the 19th century, though they want to. I didn't mean to silence all of y'all.
No, we take it
It's like,
in.
Oh, I do have one other favorite thing that was taught to me by my mentor. Fighting Nazis should be fun. It's being a Nazi that sucks. So if you're not having fun fighting for human rights, you need to check out whether you're doing it the right way.
wow, I love that so much.
Because you really should be having fun.
Because that's the thing, talking about the right wing, they know how to throw a good party. They have fun. You go to a Trump
No,
rally,
they don't,
I
actually.
covered it. Like, it's, I don't agree with what goes on there, but it's like they know how to throw a party, and we throw like lectures. That's a Democratic rally. So I think that's such a brilliant point. Just the pleasure of it, and that activism should be joyful and positive, not punishing.
How do you do that? So, like in your class, when you're dealing with, I imagine, anywhere from the age of 20 to 25, somewhere in there, generally.
Yeah, I usually have 50 students in each of my classes when my school normal size is 12, so they pack my classes.
Yeah. So how do you get so you got these students who are there who may be like on the precipice of like, they're not really active in any sort of human rights, but they.
There's a mixture. There's a mixture. Some come from Brooklyn, New York, where they've got, vast experience living in a multicultural world, and then another set of them will come from Podunk, Vermont, and this is the first time they've been in a room with a Black person.
So what would you say to those who are on the brink, who are not quite there yet, but you can see like, man, if these people here like actually took the horse by the reins and use their privilege wherever it may come from, how do you inspire our young ones now to care about it?
I don't know if I have to inspire them to care. I just have to teach them how to use that heart. We can do a heart transplant easier. We can do an empathy transplant. You just can't make somebody empathetic. That just doesn't happen. It's in them or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But you can show them how to use that empathy that is pre-existing within them in a way that is loving and caring without them becoming eaten up, burnt out, cynical, hopeless, those kinds of things. You can teach technique, but you can't teach empathy. But you can teach them how to use their pre-existing empathy in a more effective way. For example, when I start my classes, I don't offer trigger warnings. I'm not going to protect you from the truth. My job is to teach you about the truth. I want to prepare people for the real world and to enter it with love and joy and eagerness to take their turn at the wheel kind of thing. And I also tell them to party as hard as they work, because you got to keep balance in the work. Have that toggle switch so that you can offer a critical analysis of Barbie, but then flip it off and just have fun watching Barbie or Twilight or whatever, floats your boat. I've been doing it for well over 50 years. If I had maintained the feelings when I was 16 and got tear gas, because I thought the revolution was tomorrow when I was 16. It just depended on how hard I worked and how long everybody fell into line and worked together and all that kind of stuff. But I've, of course, since learned that we're not in charge of the timeline of how fast human hearts and minds change. It'd probably be easier to levitate somebody and defy gravity than to convince somebody to change their minds if they're already not invested in having an open mind.
Loretta, do you think what's the way to say this? Do you think that we are becoming too sensitive as a culture?
No, we're becoming more mature as a culture. That our mores are growing up. Our ability to see harm is evolving. so that things that we would have given a pass to only a few years ago, we no longer have to give a pass to it.
Right.
But the point isn't whether we should hold people accountable, but how. That's what I'm saying. It's not about evading accountability. It's not about saying, I'm going to give you a pass when you told that sexist joke or said that racist thing. No, I'm not. That is not the philosophy of calling in. It is an accountability process. It's a strategic accountability process because I want to hold you accountable for your harm and help you figure out how not to commit harm again, and while not disposing of you, because that's the contradiction at the heart of the call out culture. It's replicating the prison industrial complex we call ourselves fighting: punishment, silencing, exile. Well, if that doesn't even work for the government that's got all the money and power in the world, and they can't stop recidivism, why do we think it's going to work for us? And we ain't got that money and power to put people in jail or to. And by the way, the whole call out culture thing, it doesn't even mostly work for the rich and famous. I mean, does anybody, you ever try to get into a Dave Chappelle show lately? You still got to stand in a 5-hour line to get a ticket.
Yeah.
And so we need better strategies rather than, being righteous and impotent.
I think there's also an important recognition that sometimes it's a small minority that's very loud and we take it for the majority.
That's a great point.
And so I think that
And then we want to call it everybody that bought a ticket.
right.
Escorting him, you must be part of the enemy too. And I'm like, okay, so how many of you don't listen to Michael Jackson? Or would rather Picasso was ripped from the museums and, disposed of in the trash, or won't read a Hemingway.
Gandhi, like
It's the most complicated people that produce the most exquisite art. It is a contradiction within their souls that makes it so good. So I don't want uncomplicated people producing mediocre art. I wouldn't have fun that way. But if I had the opportunity when a celebrity or somebody like that puts their foot in their mouth, I wish they would use some of my technique and learn how to make sincere, effective apologies, not the things that your, crisis communications manager prepares for you, but really help you go inside and commit to being a better person and demonstrating how to do that. People either deny that they've done any harm and claim to be misunderstood and all of that, which is probably true in their eyes, or they fall on their swords like they can't do enough mea culpas, and then want you to appreciate that they just sacrificed themselves on the altar of political purity. Either one of those doesn't work for me. I want real people around me. I don't need a martyr and I don't need an asshole. I need real people around me.
Do you think maybe the quote unquote cancel culture would look different if we had people putting into practice what you're saying and having sincere apologies versus like publicist written videos and apologies and things like that? An apology that doesn't expect forgiveness.
Yeah.
Would we be in the same position if we actually knew how to apologize and mean it?
Well, I don't know
sincerely
if we'd be in the same position, but we'd be in a different position if we knew how to forgive.
That's right. I like that.
I read about this man named Chris Singleton, and his mother was one of the 9 church goers who was killed in Charleston, South Carolina. You remember that, the massacre at the church, 9 people killed when Obama went down and sang Amazing Grace, etc.
Of course.
And Chris, in an interview, said that a lot of people think that forgiveness is a sign of weakness. He said, but I see forgiveness as a sign of strength, because I want to not give this guy who killed my mama a permanent home in my heart. I don't want him permanently tarring the memory of my mother. I see it as a harm reduction strategy, a reclamation of my dignity that he tried to steal from me and my family. And so I love not only that he stated that and meant it, but again, if this man can work on forgiving someone who killed his mama, I'm sorry. What's your excuse? Help me understand what your excuse is then, to not even see the possibility of gaining strength through forgiveness instead of seeing it as a weakness.
So what does that look like practically online? It's so different. I feel like when you have a chance to be in front of somebody, you'll oftentimes never say the thing that you would say with your keyboard courage, because you have to look into the eyes. And when you look into somebody's eyes, it's very hard to not see a human. You get so desensitized to the unhoused here in LA that you just start walking by them. But when you actually stop and look somebody in the eye, it's hard to ignore them. And so it's easier to walk by them and pretend like they don't exist than it is to stop, ask them how they're doing and what if they need something, because that's going to then become an inconvenience of your time, because it's very hard to turn away another human. And so much of your work is about humanizing. How do we move in the direction of call in and humanizing each other when there is so much vitriol, there's so much hate, there's so much frustration? Like, as a society, how do we collectively start to change our behavior and create space for other people's humanity and begin to put into practice what you are teaching, which is calling somebody in and seeing their humanity?
I'm going to try to answer your question in your questions.
I know. I'm just there's so much to cover, and I'm sorry.
It's been 2 years. He's been thinking about this conversation for 2 years.
Right. First of all, I've been homeless, living on the street with my son. And so I never not see a homeless person. I mean, right now I'm very well housed, but at the same time, just like I can't forget that I'm a rape survivor, I can't forget that what it's like to be in the snow with no shelter. And so I can never be oblivious to the homeless people, but everybody doesn't have that experience, and I don't want everybody to have that experience, by the way. So what we can do to address that question is repurpose our privileges instead of being ashamed of it. That's what I call that work. So, for example, y'all remember the story about the 2 black men at the Starbucks who got arrested for waiting on their friend? I'm sure you remember the story because it was quite a national story. Right. Do you know why you know that story?
No.
Anybody? Because a white woman whipped out her cell phone and documented it for her.
Oh, yeah.
Because she knew she wasn't going to get arrested for waiting at a Starbucks. She repurposed her white privilege in the service of justice. All of us can do that. And I'm sure she wasn't having no deep political thoughts about racial politics and whether or not she could be a white person. I mean, you know what I'm saying? She did the human thing to see unfairness and say, I'm not going to stand by idly while it takes place. So you don't have to have any special training or learning. We all have opportunities to do the right thing. And we think we have to do it because we know somebody who represents a group, or we're in relationship with somebody, or who knows us and who we know. But the relationship that most matters is with your own integrity. Are you going to become the best that you can be? And that means using both your privileges and your disadvantages in a way that ends those disadvantages for others. So I'm not advocating for everybody to become homeless. I'm advocating for those who are not homeless, or as the latest language says, unhoused, to do whatever we can, where we can. Like they say in the civil rights movement, if the world's a mess, just start sweeping where you are. Maybe you don't need to take on the whole world, but you can certainly take on the space that you have to interact with every day. And that's a choice. And by the way, it's also equally valid to not feel that you have the bandwidth to do it, too. So we shouldn't be criticizing people for not always wanting to be on the front line. Sometimes they need to take care of self, because if they don't attend to their own healing and they're still bleeding from their soul wounds, all they're going to do is bleed all over whoever they're trying to help.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it does take a certain amount of healing. And in terms of the anger you talked about, I find that we're all kind of socialized into not learning about self-forgiveness. Because when we were children, if we got punished for making a mistake and shamed and blamed for making a mistake, then we think it's natural to do that kind of punishment and shaming and blaming to others. But if we were taught self-forgiveness as children and what we could learn from making our mistakes, when we're assured that we were loved despite making a mistake, then we're better prepared to offer that kind of grace and forgiveness to others. So you can't forgive anybody else if you can't forgive yourself. If you're still futilely pursuing some standard of perfection that's unattainable, so you're beating yourself up for not being perfect and you're willing to jump on everybody else for not being perfect.
Mm.
And, we're crappy people with crappy skills trying to do the right thing. That's basically who we are. And if you don't recognize that reality, then you're going to alienate many more people than you draw in, because it's a shifting goalpost. And then we don't need language police, because language police call themselves preventing harm, but they're causing harm because they're making people feel ashamed of not knowing the latest language. And so what we need to do, in my opinion, is build on the positive. Most people have an inner good opinion of themselves that they don't always manifest externally. So instead of focusing on the external, quote, problematic behavior, I want to help them align that inner good opinion of themselves with what they do on the outside.
Yes.
I mean, I want to talk to somebody like I did in my TED Talk. I talked about how my Uncle Frank would run into a burning building and save somebody if he could. And he wouldn't care whether they were gay, straight, black, white. He wouldn't care, because that's the good Uncle Frank. But that doesn't mean Uncle Frank wouldn't have some racist stuff coming out of his mouth. And so my conversation with Uncle Frank is to help him understand that good Uncle Frank on the inside can be the same good Uncle Frank on the outside. But you get to choose which Uncle Frank you want to be.
Wow.
I was too young to sit at the lunch counters of the 50s and get spit upon. But I always wondered, what would I have done if I'd been born a slave? Would I have fought? What would I have done? Could I have sat there at that Woolworths counter and let people spit on me to make a point about my dignity and freedom? I don't know. I don't know if I would have been brave enough right back then, but I do know right now that we're all at our lunch counter moment. And the question is, can we make peace enough with our anger to lead with our love and change history? It's not easy. It ain't easy, but it's what's required.
What are some practical ways you think that we can make peace with our anger?
Well, I was doing a calling in training at Harvard this summer, and it was one Black woman within a group of white people. They were Harvard's conflict resolution negotiation unit, all attorneys. And the sister asked me, she said, Loretta, I really have trouble with all these microaggressions that I'm experiencing, and it makes me be the angry Black woman. And I don't want to be the angry Black woman, but I'm always being daily hurt by all these microaggressions. And I'm afraid that if I hold back my anger, then I'm practicing respectability politics and giving all these people hurting me a pass. What should I do? And so I asked her, I said, well, who are you inside? I said, what's the feeling you have inside that who you really are? She said, well, inside I'm filled with love. I said, well, why aren't you leading with love to address injustice instead of the role that you've been assigned, which is the angry Black woman? Which one is the authentic self? The one you're forced to act out, or the one that's really inside? Because that may be where your pain is. People are going to do those kind of crazy microaggressions because of who they are, not because of who you are. And when I told her that, she thought a minute and she said, well, how do you lead with love? And then I said, well, the next time somebody says something to you that's a little off, why don't you just look them straight in the eye and say, that's an interesting thing you just said. Yeah. Do you mind if we stop and talk about it? Mm-hmm. Or tell me more about why you think I don't belong at Harvard. Or, there's a whole number of ways we can respond and invite a conversation instead of a fight. That's the kind of changes that you have to do inside in order to make a difference outside.
How do you do? Thank you for all of this. Earlier, we were talking about some of the, I don't want to say extremes, but I'll use it just for lack of a better term. People who are overtly racist or sexist, people that have done such heinous crimes against women. But most people in my life are not and do
Or
not
not that.
reflect those people. Most people,
Okay.
the most racism I've experienced are decent, good people. Some family
Right.
members, some friends, people who consider themselves good people, but I've still been hurt by. Women, I believe as well. It's not these people that are serving life sentences. It's the men around them. It's family. It's their work environment. It's good people. And oftentimes when we don't see ourselves as those as extreme people, we may not think that we have work to do. So how do you engage with culture now and people now who can clearly say, well, I'm not Harvey Weinstein, or I'm not this guy over here, I'm not that woman over there, or whatever? How do we engage them? How do you engage the people who don't see themselves in these extreme people, but still have work to do and are still causing harm towards women and people of color?
Well, part of it is in my life reflection. The people who were most able to hurt me were the people who also loved me. Yeah. Nobody could cut like my mama, and I had no doubt that she loved me. But it was always a mixture of love and pain. And that's how families are, basically. At least the ones that, on the side of being somewhat healthy, not totally healthy. So that was an early life lesson that the people who most could hurt me were the people that I let get close enough to hurt me. I'm more indifferent to the stranger in a supermarket than a cutting remark from my mama. It's just different. But I wouldn't want to build a movement that my mama wasn't in, even though she's capable of saying homophobic, racist, whatever. My parents are dead now, but I'm speaking, metaphorically, because they did those things as well. So really, it's a constant renegotiation with yourself about how you're going to control your reaction to other people's stuff.
Yeah.
That you have a choice. As a matter of fact, I've created something I call the 5C continuum of calling in, which is calling out, canceling, calling on, calling in, and calling it off. I mean, those are at least 5 choices you have in the face of injustice and harm. You can call somebody out and publicly shame and blame them. You can cancel them by trying to get them fired or at least lose their reputation. Or you can call on them to do better, to align their inner good opinion with their outer behaviors. Or you can call them in by saying, I want to have this conversation with you about something you've done, then I'm not sure if that represents the best you that's available for us to have. Or you can choose to, but going back to your social media question, Justin, you can call it off. Why would you spend time engaging in non-productive conversations with people that aren't even operating in good faith, who want to hurt people? I mean, think about the use of the N word. For me, the question isn't people's right to use it. The question always is, why would you want to? What is there going on in your soul that would even encourage you to even inadvertently hurt somebody? What do you get out of that? So if somebody called me the N-word, that's going to be my first reaction. Not to embrace it for myself. I know I'm not the N-word, but I do want to know why they would want to sling it my way. What's going on? Assuming they're not doing it on purpose. I mean, we got trolls in the world. When I'm in my classes, I talk about the zeros and the 25% that we will not ever build bridges to because they barely agree that gravity works. But everybody to the left of them, I either define as a problematic ally, a proven ally, or a potential ally. And it's up to me to figure out the right strategy to bring them into conversation with their own integrity and dignity.
Right. And the microaggression, point you made is exactly that, right? It's like you're not trying to solve their problem for them, right? You're just saying, why did you do that? And then you're inviting them to solve that problem for themselves.
I'm genuinely curious because if you're not a troll, if you're not dedicated to harming people and making money off of injustice, I'll assume that you're just a regular person like most of us who may be racially illiterate, may be gender insensitive, may be slightly transphobic. I mean, you could be a number of things, and I'm not trying to label. I want to have a conversation to kind of find out sometimes. But I have to honestly say I don't like a lot of people, so I'm not, that kumbaya kind of girl. I'm a very
That's
linear person, so don't be thinking that I'm auditioning for Jesus. So not that person. But I kind of have a decision tree that I use because we all make mistakes. And the decision tree for me is, do you handle your mistakes as a child or an adult? If you handle them as a child, you'll deny that you made a mistake. You'll deny that harm took place because of your mistake. You won't apologize for it. In fact, you'll probably double down on it and create more harm. Then that's going to increase the likelihood that I'm going to call you out. But if you make that same mistake and you recognize and own that mistake that you've made, and you want to repair the harm that you've done and want to make a plan for doing better in the future, then I'm going to invest my time in you to see if we can grow together. And so I'm kind of like Bill Murray in that Christmas movie. Sometimes, Claire, you got to scrape them off. And sometimes you invest in them. And we have no obligation to do either. What we have is choices. And that choice depends on your internal emotional temperature. Because some days you do want to have that conversation with someone who's difficult, who hasn't reconciled their soul. And some days you just want to say, talk to the hand. And so it's a lot more complicated than we like to think it is. That's why context matters.
Yeah.
Intent matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so if someone steps on my foot accidentally, I'm going to have a different reaction than if they did it on purpose, even though my toe is still hurting.
Yeah, I say all the time.
Because I'm going to calculate and calibrate my response based on context, intent. What do I want out of this situation? Those kinds of things.
But now we're living in an age where there's context collapse,
What do you mean by that?
where it's hard to have context, especially on social media today or with news articles where there's so much, where everything's about clickbait and headlines and this and this, that it's so hard to have a full story, as an example, because there's so many emotions happening and so much frustration and anger that it could be maybe somebody stepped on your toe, but then there's a social media post about it and they're calling for that person who stepped on your toe to lose his job.
Well, no, let's be clear. Let's talk about something we all know. Y'all remember Alexi McCammon, the Black woman who was hired at Teen Vogue, and before she could even take the job, she got fired for a tweet she'd done when she was 17 years old, 10 years before. And someone unearthed her tweet and then weaponized it against her and got her fired. Y'all remember that story? The way to handle that was so easy if you believe in the call-in culture, because all they had to ask Alexi is, what were you thinking then? Do you think the same thing now? What will you do differently in the future? And if you think you did harm, what are you going to do about it? You know, when we catastrophize people's mistakes is where it goes off into the deep end. As if they're supposed to be perfect. We gave them a pop quiz. They failed it. So we got the right to just jump down all their throats with boots on because they had made the mistake of not being perfect for us. You know? And then we live behind our own facades, pretending that we're better than we actually are. We don't have these contradictions roiling around in our souls and the secrets we're hiding. I mean, part of adulting is learning to lie less to yourself.
But in that situation, what then does one do who isn't involved, but we're watching this happen? And then thousands of people,
we call it.
Thousands of people are tweeting, that person should be fired, right? This is what's happening now. So in the court of public opinion, then the company seems like they have to make the choice to fire that person. So what's the alternative? Because what you're saying makes perfect sense, but how does that hold up to the social media judge and jury?
Well, first of all, you choose not to participate in amplifying that social media judge and jury.
Of course.
I am on all the I'm not on TikTok or nothing. I really have aged out of that one, but I am on all the other social media things. And I have lots and lots, hundreds of opportunities to participate in a pile-on because that's how a lot of my friends mistakenly think that's how they do human rights work. What they don't realize is that calling people out is our tactic of last resort. It's not the first thing you do. You try to talk to people first. You ask them questions first. You inquire. So if I end up in a online scrum, I'm going to make a decision whether or not I want to participate in it or not, and I'm not going to participate in a pylon. But if I know somebody in the scrum, I'm going to say, "Hey, Dorothy, is this how you want to be online? That they know you as someone trying to replicate the prison industrial complex? Silencing, punishing, disposing of people because you're pissed off that they did whatever." I mean, if I know people, if it's total strangers, then I may have less investment in helping them see that there's another way that they can be. And so that would be my calling off disengagement strategy. But if they're in my Facebook feed or my LinkedIn network, chances are I know them anyway because I don't want 60,000 people in my damn network. I just want the ones I would care about hearing about their birthdays or their food plates or whatever. But I have a lot of dear friends who are in severe pain because, it's kind of hard for a Black woman to grow up in this country and not get traumatized. And so, and they handle it in all kinds of different ways. And I'm not going to dispose of them simply because they don't have healing ways of handling their pain. But I'm also not going to ignore the pain or not hold them accountable for the pain that they cause others. Like I have one girlfriend who has to jump in and criticize everything somebody else says simply because she feels unheard. And so that's her way of getting attention to herself. And so I'll just interrupt that kind of thing and say, hey, girlfriend, you know you're pushing people away with this behavior instead of pulling them in, and you're wondering why nobody wants to invite you to the picnic. you know? Would you like for us to spend some time talking about how you can do this differently and what's going on with you that makes you feel that you have to get attention in this kind of way? Online, I have relatives that only get on social media so they can complain about the rest of the family. I mean, that's apparently their only use of social
Oh, yeah,
media.
I got some of those.
So that they can cuss other people out, talk about how they're raising their kids, da 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 da. And some of them I engage with, and some of them I say, I don't have time for that right now. Have a good life kind of thing. I'll see you at the family reunion and let it go. And so each one of those are opportunities. There's no hard and fast rule about what you should always do because what will always change in those situations is how you feel in the moment. Some days you feel like you can offer grace to somebody else. And sometimes you're like, I ain't feeling it today. I'm just going to walk on by and hope you have a good life. Be authentic. Be true to yourself. As I say, you can say what you mean and mean what you say, but it's a choice whether you say it mean. And if you can't say it with love, then don't say it. Just keep on walking. Come back when you can say it with love. You're not compromising what you say, but you are choosing how you deliver it. Are you delivering in a way so someone can hear you, or are you delivering in a way to shut somebody else up?
Beautiful.
I would thinking about this for the rest of my life. This conversation.
So good.
You can see it's like, I remember watching you, Loretta, and just kind of like, kind of having the same reaction that I think you are, which is like, there's so much to think about.
Well, the one question I always ask in my training is, how well is that grudge you're walking around with working for you?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You think you might do something different about putting it down one day and see how liberating that might feel?
Yeah.
My wife always says that it lives in their heart. She's like, yeah, I don't need to hold on to that.
Well,
I don't want it to live in my heart. It lives in their heart.
yeah.
Well, Nelson Mandela said, hatred is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies.
Yeah.
It requires you to look as someone who's been divorced and have other friends who have been divorced. And they look at my relationship now with my ex-wives, which is a loving one. And they may not have that. And what I've often have said was, well, you have to plan now. Like, what would you like if you could see 5 years from now or 10 years? What would you like to see your life look like? Most people will say, I'd like it to be peaceful. I'd like to get along. I'd like to have whatever it may be. I'd like my child to not hate the new person in my life and whatever it may be. So what you do now is going to reflect what it looks like in 5, 10 years from now. So hatred, almost all these things when we're offended, when you carry it, if you were to stop for a second, what do I want this to look like in 5 years from now? And if you really do that, then plan today. So what you do right now will affect that, how we heal. Forgiveness. You forgive. And I don't just mean with the words as we're talking about, but, really
mean it.
Really mean it. Then you can be like, that's in 5 years from now, you will actually be free. You will have more joy. It won't be a permanent spot in your home, in your heart, but you got to do it now.
And it's your timeline, not theirs, right?
Yeah.
Not if you wait for them to apologize, if you wait for them to realize the harm they've done, then you're on their timeline instead of your own timeline.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they do it, they're gonna be caught up in a catch-22, because if they offer an apology, they may be read as trying to game the system, or if they try to deny that they did any harm, then they're going to be read as evading responsibility. So they're caught up in a catch-22 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll just say, I've been so fortunate to have had great relationships in my life. And this may sound a bit raunchy, but at my 50th birthday party 20 years ago, 3 of my 5 past boyfriends all came to party with us in Jamaica while my current boyfriend was there.
Yes.
And they got along like a house of fire. Because I have a tendency to only choose quality men, and we're friends before we get together and we stay friends afterwards.
There you go.
And I love living that life.
So what you're saying is men and women can be friends.
If you're not friends, I'm not sure how successfully you can be husband and wife.
That's
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Amen.
Wow.
All right. So we are coming to our end, and I'm really interested to hear what your answer is to our final question.
Okay.
Liz, why don't you ask it?
What does it mean to you to be man enough? What does man enough mean to you?
I love men who care as much about their dreams as I do, because I can't be in a relationship with someone where I don't work my ass off for their dreams. So I want them to care as much about their dreams as I will.
Wow.
And
Love
then we
that.
make a great partnership.
I love that.
Loretta J. Ross, thank you so much for coming on the
thank you,
show.
thank you.
Thank you for all of your work. There's no doubt that our work here would not exist without all of the work that you trailblazed, and your dedication to human rights is such a beautiful thing to witness, and it's an honor to share space with you virtually. And thank you so much for coming and joining us on this podcast. And correct me if I'm
Can
wrong.
I say
Do you
one
have-
last thing?
Yes, please.
Because I often get asked by men, why am I a feminist? Because they think of feminism as a man hater. I said, I've always been a feminist because I want better men.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that.
I love that.
I love it. That's right.
Us
in
too,
line with you.
and that's why
That's why we're
that's
here.
why we're here. That's why
Yeah.
all of us are here at this table. Is we believe men are inherently good, and we want to be better men, and most men want to be better men, and we love having people on like yourself to help us figure that out. So thank you so much for coming. And you have a book coming out soon?
Yeah, it's called Calling in the Calling Out Culture. That's its working title. And Simon & Schuster will be releasing it
Amazing.
in early 2025.
Wow.
I can't wait. Will you come back and come on the show when you promote the book?
Right. Well, but can I do a small commercial?
Please.
Because I teach stuff online
Yes.
for only
Yes.
$5 a class.
Let's go, please. Come on.
I call it the Walmart of consciousness raising. So look up my name, Loretta J. Ross, and you can sign up for online training and calling in technique.
Wow.
$5 a class.
Amazing.
Everybody can afford $5.
That's right.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Please go take that class.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Until next time, if you'd like to hear more episodes, where can you find us, Liz?
Anywhere you get your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can see all of our lovely faces on YouTube and Justin's backwards hat.
Everyone, we'll see you next time. This is Mad Enough. I'm Jamey Heath.
I'm Liz Plague.
And I am Justin Baldoni.
And this is
Man Enough.
Mad Enough.
You already said the man enough.
It's all good. I can say it twice.